In a stark reminder that great power competition is far from over, Russia has announced a major leap forward in nuclear weapons technology. On October 21st, a missile lifted off from a remote Russian test site, not just any missile, but the 9M730 Burevestnik, known to NATO as the SSC-X9 Skyfall. This weapon has been rumored for years, often dismissed by Western analysts as either science fiction or a dangerous experiment doomed to fail. But President Vladimir Putin shattered that skepticism this week. Seated in military fatigues and flanked by top military commanders, he confirmed that the missile had flown 14,000 kilometers, nearly one-third of the Earth's circumference, and stayed airborne for about 15 hours, powered by a miniature nuclear reactor. For Putin, this wasn't just a technical milestone, it was a geopolitical message. Russia remains a nuclear superpower with capabilities that can bypass any defense system the West builds. The Burevestnik wasn't born overnight. Putin first unveiled this missile in 2018, presenting it as Russia's answer to Washington's withdrawal from the 1972 Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty in 2001. That treaty once limited both sides from building missile shields that could undermine nuclear deterrence. After the US withdrew, Moscow believed America was pursuing first strike insurance, the ability to shoot down a retaliatory strike and thus potentially win a nuclear war. The Kremlin's solution? Develop missiles with unlimited range, unpredictable flight paths, and nuclear propulsion so they can weave around radars and hit targets from any direction. Since then, the Burevestnik has undergone multiple tests, some successful, some rumored failures. Western intelligence linked a 2019 explosion in Nonoxa to a Burevestnik test mishap, which killed Russian scientists and released radiation. Critics in the West have argued the missile poses environmental risks even in testing. But the October 21st test, if independently verified, represents the first time Russia has proven that the theoretical has become operationally realistic. General Valery Gerasimov, Russia's chief of the general staff and the man overseeing the campaign in Ukraine, proudly briefed Putin on the test. He emphasized that the missile flew on nuclear power for nearly its entire flight, something no other country has achieved in a cruise missile. Unlike traditional missiles with limited fuel, this engine can, in theory, keep the Burevestnik airborne for days or even weeks, circling the globe and approaching targets from unexpected angles. NATO missile defense systems in Europe or the Pacific are designed primarily to intercept ballistic missiles, which arc into space and then descend in predictable trajectories. A low-flying, maneuvering, nuclear-powered cruise missile presents a far harder challenge. Western defense officials have long warned that such weapons could create new instability in crisis situations. Because if a missile is launched and no one knows where it's heading or when it will strike, the risk of overreaction increases dramatically. The timing of this announcement is crucial. Russia is locked in a grinding war in Ukraine, facing unprecedented Western sanctions and draining battlefield losses. Meanwhile, the United States under President Donald Trump has escalated support to Kyiv, including intelligence support for long-range strikes inside Russia. The Wall Street Journal recently reported that Washington lifted restrictions blocking Ukraine from using certain Western missiles deep into Russian energy infrastructure. Putin has responded with warnings that any such escalation would trigger, in his words, a very serious, if not overwhelming response. The show of the Burevestnik, alongside nuclear drills conducted days earlier, including test launches of Yars ICBMs, Sineva submarine missiles, and KH-102 air-launched nuclear cruise missiles, is designed to remind both Washington and European capitals that Russia's nuclear deterrent remains formidable, modernized, and fully ready. Domestically, Putin's message is also aimed at the Russian public and his military leadership. He stated that specialists once considered this missile unlikely to ever be possible, yet now it is nearing deployment. This plays directly into his narrative of Russia as a technologically advanced state defying Western attempts to isolate and weaken it. He instructed Gerasimov to finalize deployment infrastructure and determine how the weapon should be classified within Russia's evolving nuclear doctrine. Should it be considered a strategic strike system for deterrence, like ballistic missiles? Or could it be integrated into limited conflict scenarios, adding pressure without triggering full nuclear retaliation? The answers will have huge implications for military planning on both sides of the world. For Western governments, the latest test presents a dilemma. Some analysts argue the Burevestnik may still be more of a psychological weapon, one intended to intimidate rather than deploy widely. Nuclear propulsion raises enormous reliability and environmental issues. Crashes could scatter radioactive debris over civilian areas. And missiles that take hours or days to reach targets might not be practical in a fast-escalating nuclear exchange. Others point out that even a handful of fully operational Burevestnik missiles, if fired in crisis, would render missile defense nearly irrelevant and expose NATO infrastructure to devastating surprise attacks. By publicizing the success, Russia gains both bargaining leverage in future arms control talks and a potential deterrent against deeper Western intervention in Ukraine. This balance between real capability and psychological signaling is what defines modern strategic communication between nuclear powers. International reactions have so far been measured, but concerned. The White House has not publicly commented, but policymakers in Washington and European capitals know this missile directly challenges long-standing assumptions about nuclear deterrent stability. The US has scrapped multiple arms control treaties in the last 2 decades, including INF 1987 and Open Skies 2002. And Russia suspended participation in New START 2010 in early 2023. Without agreed-upon rules or verification mechanisms, each technological advancement becomes a potential trigger for miscalculation. Analysts warn that if Russia deploys nuclear-powered cruise missiles, the US could accelerate its own next-generation systems, sparking a new nuclear arms race not seen since the Cold War, except this time with more powers involved, including China. But perhaps the clearest message from Putin is not directed at Washington, but at the world. Russia is prepared to endure a prolonged confrontation and will not be coerced into backing down in Ukraine. As General Gerasimov claimed that Russian forces were encircling Ukrainian troops around Pokrovsk and pushing in Kharkiv and other cities, the nuclear messaging amplifies Moscow's narrative that time, capability, and escalation dominance are on its side. Whether this confidence reflects reality or propaganda remains to be seen. But one fact stands out. A missile that can fly nearly anywhere on Earth without being detected or intercepted changes the strategic landscape. The Burevestnik may still be tested, refined, and debated, but a new era of nuclear unpredictability has already begun. And for the first time in years, the world is being forced to imagine what happens when nuclear weapons can roam the skies indefinitely.